Hi, I'm Suzette Bailey from Autopilot Business Systems, and welcome. I have Kal Ientile on the phone with me today online. Kal, do you want to say a few words about your business?
Thanks, Suzette. My name's Kal Ientile. I'm the director of KIAcupuncture in Canberra City. We are an acupuncture clinic that deals mostly with office workers and athletes, helping them get through the obstacles that are stopping them from getting on with what they want to do in life. So a lot of it has to do with pain, and so whether it's a tension headache or an injury that's stopping people from getting on with their chosen sport, that's what we help them work through and get back on with living life and enjoying it.
Fantastic. We've been working with you on a alpha course in regards to helping you systemize your business. Did you want to talk about a little bit about why you actually need to systemize your business and what you're looking for in that area?
Sure. So earlier this year we applied to the Telstra Business Awards, and we made it onto the shortlist. But as part of the application process, we started looking in really fine detail at what we had done so far in our business and what was still lacking, and it really brought to our attention a whole bunch of areas that we had a lot of processes, but most of them are all up in here. And so we've been expanding a lot. We've brought on a bunch of new practitioners, and the more staff we have on board, the more it makes it quite clear that everything that is in my head is only accessible if I'm there to answer the questions. And so it's really pointed out the necessity to get these systems documented and organized to the point where everyone can use them without me having to be available to answer questions or answer the phone. So, and also we want to grow further and hopefully one day even get to the point of franchising. So yeah, this is a very important step in all that process.
And how would you normally sort of have dealt with this? Sort of what's the sort of normal steps that trying to actually systemize your business if you hadn't been sort of working with us? How would you have gone about it?
All of the systems that I've currently got documented was a fairly painful process of sitting down and trying to force my mind to come up with everything that needed to be written down. A little bit like the old thing of starting a uni assignment. I knew what I needed to write, but just getting started on it was a real problem.
Yeah, and that's something that we find a lot with and as you know, and some people do, but not everyone. I love systems, I love patterns, but I do appreciate that not everyone does. And not everyone thinks that way. So it is one of those things that we do come up across is a big issue is not enough time, but also how do I even get started? So that's one of the things that we're trying to get over. So we had you in working with us as in our alpha course with the Autopilot Business Systems. So can you talk to how you found it before and after, sort of using our system or our course versus trying to do it on your own?
Sure. So I started doing a few of the processes my own way, and trying to get it all clear in my head and write it down in one step-by-step process, which was the way that was a bit difficult to get started. In the module 4, when we started talking about the process of he called it a brain dump, of getting each piece of the puzzle written down on a separate post-it and just getting it out of my head so that I could then see it. Once I start to do that, it's so much easier to figure out which piece needs to go where. But whilst it's all still in my head, finding it's very hard to get that visual image of that puzzle.
Yeah, that's why I do like the brain dump. I use it a lot with some of the things I do. And it comes down to that people not being able to think of things and analyze at the same time. So while you're trying to work out the process order, as well as actually trying to work out other pieces of the process, a lot of people find that their brains just sort of get a bit sort of, now what do I do? So with going through it, because I know you did some before you actually got the Post-it notes, have you actually had a chance to do any with the Post-it note methods? How are you finding that at the moment?
I'm just in the process of starting on that now. So not only using that now for the processes I've still got to get written, but I've also got a whole bunch of new copy and articles that I need to write for the new website that's being developed. And so I'm starting to apply that process to writing the articles as well, because a lot of our content needs to be referenced and you know, accurate in a technical sense, as well as being easy to read. And so that amount of analysing whilst trying to be creative can be quite a mentally challenging process. So I'm just getting started and getting the hang of using the Post-it notes now, but yeah, finding it's already an easier process.
Yeah. So part of this was also to give you some help with your area. So what are the sort of things that you're finding still difficult with the process, or any questions that you might actually have around how to sort of get that out of your head and getting the next steps, or anything that you'd want to pass on to someone else as part of this?
One of the areas that's still a little bit difficult is just sitting down and thinking about which processes need to be documented. And so I've scheduled in a staff meeting where we can talk about all this, and so I can find out from my staff which areas they need to get a little bit of clarity on. At the moment, I'm finding it a little bit like when someone says, think of a joke, and all of a sudden your mind goes blank. I sit down and tell myself, think of a process, and like, oh, which ones do I actually need to do? What are they right now?
I know because of time-wise, you've not actually, I think, done module 2 and 3. And part of that is actually that process, is going through and identifying what processes you should actually be systemizing first. And some of the things that with that are, think about ones that are going to give you the best benefit in the fastest period of time. So things that you're doing daily, or that you've got lots of people doing the same thing over and over again. So if it's something that you're only doing once a month or once every few months, that's probably not a great candidate to start with. Pick something that you're doing regularly, even if it's very small. The other thing that with this is also think about actually starting to write the processes down while you're actually doing them. So not necessarily think of them all up front, but also when something comes up and goes, oh, this is something actually we do a lot, maybe we should write some notes down at the same time. And that'll then kickstart the process of being able to go away and then do the Post-it method after that. So at least you have a few notes about what process is being used regularly in your business, or at least on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Now, the other one that makes a really good candidate is ones that are going to be things that are actually super important. So if you don't get it right, it can be critical to your business. So they may be the next ones that you do after you do that. So that sort of high transactional based ones. But I always sort of suggest that you do a bit of maybe a brain dump in this area. Do them in groups of about 3 to 5 processes. Don't focus on any more than 3 to 5 processes at a time, because you generally can't think anymore. Like as soon as you start to go beyond 5 processes of that you've got to document, the first thing your brain is going to go is, oh my gosh, this is just so big. Why am I, what this is, and you start getting into overwhelm. By breaking it down into 3 to 5 processes at a time and focusing on just those 3 to 5 at first, it gives you sort of a sense of accomplishment. Oh, well, I've done these ones. What's the next ones? And then the next ones. And so when you do have that staff meeting, think about grouping them together. You might even want to use the Post-it note method for grouping. It's a great way to get everyone to write their ideas down of all the processes that need to be done, and then group them together into that sort of 3 to 5 at a time, based on the criteria of what you're doing, the frequency of how often you're doing it, how many people are doing it, and what's the importance of that particular one. Now, the other one for you personally versus your staff are also ones that Are these systems that should be you be doing them? Are they business critical, or are they ones that are your sort of area of expertise? Or are they more admin things that support the business and they can be passed on to someone else? So if they can be passed on to someone else, they're also really good candidates for actually being systemized sooner rather than later, because you can then start to get some of your time back specifically and get you out of the day-to-day aspect and focusing on the business as opposed to doing the day-to-day aspects. Does that?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I was just thinking, it sounds like I need to strategically place a bunch of post-it notes around the clinic with a pen at each, so that I can grab one and jot something down as soon as it pops into my mind, rather than going, yeah, I've got to do that, and then forgetting about it by the time I have time to write it down.
Yeah, it is a great method. It's why I always have post-it notes very close to me. And in fact, you can probably see behind me on the wall, post-it notes are a very big part of our idea. A lot of people go, you live in the digital world, you implement information systems and these sort of things, but you love post-it notes. And I'm like, well, sometimes you've got to get out of the technology and just go with the well, take yourself offline, because technology can sometimes, well, in a lot of cases actually, can really complicate things. And a trusty post-it note with a pen can be more powerful in a lot of cases than a whole lot of other things. Now, an alternative is also getting yourself like a little notebook and just writing them down as sort of like little dot points in your notebook, because that can also be a way of keeping them all together. The only thing with that is that when it's a little bit harder to then reorganize them and do them to be able to see them visually if you do it that method. But it can also be a way of just, sort of having a discrete sort of notebook with you at all times if you want to do that as when you have a bright idea.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. So moving forward, you are, I know we're sort of in the midst of the course and we've got a little way to go. So what are some of the things that you would like to see as part of that course moving forward, and things that would actually help you as a business?
I think a few more techniques, if you've got them up your sleeve, of different ways to document things, because I know for some of the processes that we use, they're ones that involve using multiple different systems. So I've got a computer system that runs my appointment book and does my transactions, but then I've got another one that links to keep the books in order, and then I've got another one that links to communicate with the clients. And so when we start working across multiple different systems, writing down all the processes starts to become very tedious. So yeah, finding out some ways to make that work a little bit more effectively would be great.
Yeah. One straight up, a really great one is being able to use screen capture software, particularly when you're doing a lot of work on a computer, particularly across systems, is get a screen capture software. The one we use is Snagit from TechSmith, so techsmith.com, so TechSmith.com. Great software. It's about $50 US, so not a particularly expensive one. And what it means is that whenever you're actually doing a particular process that you want to document, instead of having to try to actually document it in a manual way, even with the post-it notes, you can just, when you're doing that process, have it capture it on video for you so that people can watch what you do on the screen. So particularly great with the systems that you mentioned, particularly if you're going between systems, you can actually, the person who's watching it can watch you do what you need to do in real time, watching that video. So that's part of the documenting a task as you're actually doing the task, which can make it a less, well, for one thing, you don't need to worry about getting started because you're just doing the process of whatever you're doing at the time. And secondly, you're more likely to actually capture all the steps because you're doing it at the time, sort of thing. So, and it's particularly useful for IT-based systems.
Okay, excellent. So Snagit by techsmith.com.
Yes.
I'll have to have a look at that one.
Yeah, and it just sits on your computer. It actually has a baby brother, which is free, which is Jing, Jing.com. One of the things I do recommend, it is worth paying for the Snagit version, because it does allow you to edit the video. Because sometimes when you're particularly swapping between systems on an IT or on a computer, there can be delays, you could be waiting for screens to load and things like that. And when you're talking about a video that you want people to watch afterwards, you don't necessarily need all of those. So you can actually go in and remove little sections, ums and ahs, things like that. And it can be edited by somebody like a video editor, for instance, as well. So it doesn't have to be just edited within Snagit, but you've got a lot more control, whereas Jing doesn't allow you to do that. Now, the other thing with this is that once you actually have that video, the next step is being able to actually create a step-by-step instruction from that becomes very easy, because you now can pass that video over to an assistant, either within the business or outsourcing it to a virtual assistant to actually document the step-by-step instruction from the video.
That sounds like a much more efficient way to do things. Can you record a voiceover of explaining why you're doing the steps?
Yeah.
Excellent.
As you're walking through it, you are talking to as if you were explaining it with somebody sitting next to you, and you were explaining it as a training. So you might find, if you want to, for the first time, you just record it just so that you have a copy of it and you've got the video. You may then want to go back and actually do it another time to actually record the video that you keep moving forward, and just have a few practices and that sort of thing. Because it can take, sometimes when you first start talking to your computer, it feels a bit odd, and you'll feel, sort of like, I'm just talking to myself. But it does come, once you get into the flow, it actually works really well. And it's a much more natural way of getting a process out of your head, because you're just doing the process. You're not thinking about having to try to document it or anything like that, because you're just doing the process and you're just talking to someone about it. So it comes off much more natural. But you will find that in the future modules. Okay. Yes.
All right. So what's the next step? What's the most efficient place for me to be putting my efforts right at the moment?
Look, I would try the post-it note form, because it does help, particularly for ones that are not IT based. You'll find that it will actually be a lot easier for that one. But for your IT based systems, have a go at using Snagit. We'll, over the next module of the course, we'll actually have some instructions around how to do that and how to actually move them into creating step-by-step instructions. And the other thing with this, and what I would highlight to you and to everyone else who's watching this afterwards, is don't be fixated on one system. Part of what we're trying to do through the course is actually give you a range of different ways to do things, because one way is going to work better for one particular process versus another one. I know in your particular case, you have a lot of very literally hands-on work. You're working with acupuncture needles with people, and you would have your specific technique of how to do that. So a video camera with a person who has given authorization to be recorded would be a great way of being able to record the videos for staff in new training techniques. It doesn't stop you training them still, but it provides a great way of them being able to review later on, as opposed to you having to continually show them. And that can then be turned into step-by-step instructions. So it's matching the style of the documenting process to what you're actually documenting at the time.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and don't get fixated on one, because you will find that some will work better than others in different circumstances. It's part of the reason why we've tried to give you a number of different options, because we do know that, I know that over doing this for a long time, that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't really work when you're dealing with people and systems.
All right.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Did you have any other comments before we wrapped it up?
I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but I'll pop them in the Facebook group if any spring to mind.
Fantastic. And anyone else watching this, I'd really encourage you to provide it. If you've got any questions or any comments, feel free to pop them into Facebook for us, and we will definitely get back to you on that one. And thanks very much, Kal, for being today. It's been fantastic. And thank you for being part of the group. We really appreciate your comments and the work and feedback that you've provided so far.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Suzette. It's it's been quite helpful, and I'm looking forward to seeing how smoothly things run once the process is a bit more complete.
Yeah. And thanks very much, everyone, for watching, and we hope you'll join us next time. Thanks very much.